We are lucky to have with us Michel Pham, one of the world's leading experts on emotion and decision making. Michel is the Travis Professor of Marketing at Columbia University Business School. He earned his PhD in marketing at the University of Florida, and since then, being such a renowned expert, has been visiting all over the world, all over Europe and Asia, including schools like Hong Kong University of Science and Technology, and Singapore Management University, and even the Sorbonne. And so we're set? Yes? All right. So without further ado, please, Michel.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Nate. So it's a pleasure to get to come to this conference, whether as an audience member or a speaker. So thank you very much for the opportunity. The work I'm going to share with you is, I think, fairly simple, and this is some work that I've been doing for the past few years with a couple of colleagues, Eileen Aidinley, who is at Vrije Universiteit in Amsterdam, and Yangji Gu, who is at Group HEC. And the question that we're investigating in these papers, is very simple. We know it's the question of a consumer who is confronted with a choice between buying and shopping at a large store that has a lot of assortments, a big assortment, or buying from a store that has a smaller assortment. And that's a very common problem that consumers face. And we know that there's a very established finding that, confronted with this type of choice, the majority of consumers tend to gravitate toward a larger store or the larger assortment store. Okay, so there's a preference for buying at the larger assortment store. And we also know that if they were to do that, sometimes there's something that could happen downstream whereby they go there, there's lots of choices, they might be overwhelmed by that, be demotivated. This is something called the paradox of choice or the choice overload phenomenon. This is not what we're going to be talking about. That exists out there. What we're going to be talking about is really concentrate on why is it that consumers like to go to the larger store, and what do they prefer, these larger assortments, to begin with. Okay? Now, if you look at that question, it looks very simple. I mean, the answer is obvious. And there's a number of reasons why it makes sense to buy in a larger assortment store. Okay? The first reason is the most obvious. You're more likely to find something that matches whatever you're interested in, whatever you prefer to have. So there's better preference matching from buying in a larger assortment store. That's one factor. Another factor is that you might have some uncertainty and you're not sure what your family members might want to have that day, and therefore that uncertainty can be addressed better by going to a place that has a larger assortment. That is another explanation that's been offered out there. And a third explanation is that you may be a variety seeker, and today you might feel like having a different type of yogurt or different types of clothing, and of course you're going to have that better served if you have a larger assortment. So these are pretty well established explanations for the phenomenon, but you will notice that all these explanations pertain to an assumption that if I were to go to the larger store, I'm going to be able to make a better choice, however you define better choice. And so that is the main gist and what is common across those explanations. What I'm going to suggest to you today is that there's another explanation. We're not denying that these explanations are at work, but there's another explanation that has nothing to do with the possibility of making a better choice. And this is an explanation that has to do with a lot of the stuff that are sort of known for, which is that feelings and emotions carry a lot of weight in many aspects of consumption decisions. And the explanation I'm going to offer to you is that the reason why people gravitate toward the larger stores and larger assortments is often because it's simply fun to do so. They derive a certain pleasure from just exploring and having a look at the larger assortment compared to the smaller assortments. And let me deconstruct that explanation by breaking it down to step by step. So why is that happening? Well, first of all, the world of marketing, the marketplace in general, is mostly positive stimulation. So we have exciting products, we have lots of very interesting features and lots of colors, bright packaging, pleasant sounds, and so on and so forth. This is what we try to put out there to our consumers. And we know from some of the work I have done that when consumers make decisions, they often ask themselves, oh, how do I feel about this? And if you do that, you tend to extract some of the positive feelings and emotions that those stimuli that we're putting out there to the consumers are providing. And now, the bigger the assortment, the more of that positive stimulation you're going to get, the more pleasant it will be to you, and that's what is driving, in part, this attraction toward the larger assortment. So that is the general explanation I'm going to try to demonstrate to you. We have done lots of studies, a lot of studies. That project started about 5 years ago and still not published. And, but the designs are very simple, and I'm going to sort of share with you a subset of some of those studies. I think I'm going to go about 4 or 5. The paradigm is very simple, a bit stylized, I will confess. So we give our participants a purchase scenarios. We imagine that you have to buy something in a given category, and then we're going to show them an assortment. And we're going to be doing that mostly between subjects, which means that the consumer or the participant only sees one assortment. That assortment will be either large or small. And then after they have a look at that assortment, we ask them, how did you like that assortment? Was it good? Did you like it or not? Okay, that's what we're going to call the evaluation of the assortment. And to the extent that they like the larger assortment more so than the people who are exposed to the smaller assortment, we're going to say, okay, there's preference for larger assortment. Okay. Now we're going to be doing that under 2 conditions. One condition that's going to increase the likelihood that affective processes are involved in the decision. Okay. We're going to call that a high affect engagement condition. And we're also going to have a condition where we're going to mitigate or minimize the degree to which affect is involved in the decision. They're going to be the blue conditions, the cold condition. Okay? So that's the general paradigm. So the first study is a study in which we ask people, and we bring them to the lab, and we ask them, imagine you have to you go to an appliance store, you have to buy a blender. Okay? Super exciting product. And then we show them this assortment here, and there's 18 blenders in this assortment. That is a large assortment condition. If you look at these blenders, what would you like to buy? So just have a look at this. Don't tell us what you're going to buy, but just look at this assortment, okay? And we'll ask you some questions after that. Now, in the smaller assortment condition, we give them 1/3 of the number of blenders. So there are 6 blenders. Now, of course, to try to equate more or less the average quality of the blenders, we give them different sets of 6 blenders, which we rotate across participants so that on average, they see about the same level of quality of the blenders. Then, so now let's look at how much they like the assortment. So first of all, I'm sorry, I was supposed to tell you that we do that under 2 conditions. One condition where we tell them, we'd like you to focus on your feelings and emotions. Okay, we know that if you rely on your feelings and emotions, you're more likely to make better decisions. So please do focus on your feelings and emotions. That is the red condition instructions, which in my previous research we have used a lot, and that works. And then we also have another condition where we sort of tone it down, and we say, we'd like you to be analytical, focus on logic and reason and rational arguments, because if you focus on that, you're going to be making better decisions. Okay, so they are encouraged to focus on one or the other. And then let's sort of look at how much they like the assortments. Overall, so if I combine everybody, regardless of instructions that they received, you find that the people who were exposed to the larger assortment sort of like it more than the people exposed to the smaller assortment. That is a classic pattern that you observe in many studies. Nothing surprising here. But the more interesting part is that if you break down the data between the people who were asked to focus on their feelings and emotions versus the people who were asked to focus on the logic and reason, the pattern somehow split out this way. That in the logic and condition, the effect is much smaller. In fact, it's not even significant. Whereas in the condition where people focus on their feelings and emotions, it's magnified. Okay, so most of that main effect, if you will, in the gray bars, is really driven by the people who are looking at these assortments, focusing on feelings and emotions. Now, you might sort of criticize this study for being a bit heavy-handed, because we tell them, here's the way you should be making your decision. That's a little bit heavy-handed. So we're going to try to make it a bit less heavy-handed in different studies. So one of the studies where we did that, so let me skip this slide here. We had people choose between 2 places where they can book a hotel. And now this is going to be done within subject, which means they now see these 2 websites, one of them with a large selection of hotels, another one with a small selection of hotels. And then to manipulate the degree to which affective engagement is involved, we're going to give them slightly different motives for evaluating the hotels. In one condition, we tell them, hey, you are planning a romantic getaway with your partner. Okay, and so we know that when people have these kind of motives and mindsets, they tend to rely much more on their feelings. In the other condition, imagine that you are planning a business trip for a job interview with a colleague. Okay? And we know that those kind of instructions mitigate the degree to which people rely on their feelings. And then we sort of see which of the two assortments do they gravitate toward. So in this case, they make an actual choice between the two assortments. Now, not surprisingly, so these are the consumption motives manipulations. And not surprisingly, on average, people gravitate toward, a vast majority gravitate toward the larger assortment, which is what you would expect. And that could be accounted for by many different explanations that I explained earlier. The more interesting finding, though, is that if you break down the data between the motive conditions, you will see that the effect is more pronounced among the people who encourage to think about it as a romantic getaway, and therefore were much more likely to rely on their feelings and emotions, than the people who were looking at it from a business trip's perspective, where feelings and emotion presumably were not as engaged. So these are just 2 out of many, many studies we have done of this type, and we've played different games like that. But let me sort of give you another study where we don't even change the decision. Everybody is asked to do the same thing, the same judgment. We don't change the motivation for doing it. So everybody is told, oh, you need to now to buy a game app from an app store, like an iTunes app store or the Apple app store. And in one condition, we give them a large assortment. In another condition, we give them a small assortment. And again, we're going to ask them, how much do you like the assortment? Now, how do we manipulate affective engagement in this way, in this experiment? Is we're going to be doing something very simple. Instead of giving them the app store this way in the, which is what we call the affect rich condition in this condition, the other one, we're just going to turn that into a black and white store. That's simple. Same information, but now it's black and white. And then you can sort of see that affectively it's not as rich, right? It's not as engaging. And guess what happens? Okay, in the affect-rich condition, much greater preference or much greater liking for the larger assortment of apps compared to the smaller one. And if you turn that black and white, the difference becomes non-significant. So it really is how much fun you're making the stimulation for the participant that is driving the effect, and nothing about the quality of the option. So the choice quality is not going to change based on our manipulation. So now, after probably a dozen of those studies that we had done over the years and many journal rejections, we ended up finding a place that said, you know, we'll give you another chance, but what we'd like you to do, can you reverse it? Can you make people hate the large assortments? If you can do that, then we would be impressed. And then we're like, oh my God, it was a little hard, but we found a way of doing it. And then I'll sort of show you how you do that, okay? So here's what we did. We had people imagine that they are buying coffins. And we had to do that. We had done it. We had to buy coffins for funeral home. And we came up with lots of these ideas. No, I mean, first of all, you had to play a lot. It's not enough to play with coffins. We also had to play with the names. So my co-author invented those names: gloom, agony, sourness, heartbreak. I mean, that's, it was, it was really, I mean, all right. That's all. Okay, so we have those stimuli. We have them.
What to do with the paper, I think.
What do you say?
This is what they want you to do with the paper.
All right, so, and guess what happens? And then again, we have them rely more on their feelings or more on logic and reason. And the result, indeed, reverse, okay? So, all right, so in the logic and reason condition, they prefer the slightly larger assortment compared to the smaller. So it's not a big difference, but that, it's there still, okay? But in the feelings and emotion, boom, then now all of a sudden they say, no, just give me the smaller assortment. I don't want to see the larger assortment. All right, so you can see that's just the same story. People are attracted to this larger assortment because they derive some positive affect from the assortment, except, of course, when the product category and the kind of conditions is not helping them recruiting positive affect, but in this case, it's recruiting negative affect. Okay, so based on our results, we can sort of go back in time and see, because sometimes we had trouble getting even the basic effect that people like larger assortments rather than smaller assortments. Now we know why. It's because, of this explanation. You need to have an affective engagement for that effect to take place. And so we're able, based on that, to go back not just on our studies, but go back on other studies that have been published in the literature, including some of the studies that my friend here has conducted over the years. Okay, and because if you look at the basic phenomenon of the preference, yeah, I'll be done, of the preference for larger assortments, this is a meta-analysis where we look at, we were able to identify 31 studies where that phenomenon could be tested. And you can see that for most of the studies, this is an effect size measure, and then you can see that it's positive, so people prefer larger assortment compared to smaller assortment. It varies a lot across studies, but there are a bunch of studies on the right-hand side of the chart where it's not significant, or even sometimes it reverses, right? And now if you relook at those studies and you try to analyze the stimuli that they have, and what we did, we just had participants just look at the product categories and ask them, would you have fun looking at these products? Okay, that's simple, and this is the measure of fun that they report on average. You can see that a lot of the variance across those effect sizes can be explained simply by the fact that some of the stimuli, the product categories, are just more fun than the other ones, and you're much more likely to get that effect if the categories were fun to review. All right, so let me sort of spend a few minutes on some of the implications of those findings. Okay, the first finding is pretty obvious, right? So that having a large assortment is going to help you much more in certain categories than others. So imagine all the categories such as vacations, ice cream, cosmetics, movies. It makes a lot of sense to have large assortment because that is like categories where people naturally would use a lot of feelings and emotions, and that really is helpful. Now, if you're selling categories such as life insurance, tax preparation, batteries, hardware tools, affect is not going to be involved very much, and that's not going to be as important for you to have a larger assortment. So that's perhaps the most obvious application. But now let's think about you are already in that category, okay? And you have a certain, you still have some decisions about do I expand or do I shrink my assortment? And then even if you have a given set of consumers, you may have different segments of the consumers where you can expect high or lower engagement of affect. So for example, if you're selling actually cars for rental, your business travelers are going to be less affect prone and affect sensitive and oriented, whereas your vacationers are much more likely to be in affective mindset. And it will make more sense for you to provide more variety of cars for your leisure travelers than for the business travelers. That would be one idea. If you are Starbucks, people are coming to your store in the morning are not going to be as affectively oriented as people who are coming into your stores on the weekend, where they're much more relaxed. So if in terms of setting your menu size, it makes a lot more sense that on the weekend you might have a big menu, lots of kind of lattes, etc. But in the morning, just provide a much simpler menu, something that is more constrained. So that will be some kind of the implications. Another thing you can do also is to think about, all right, I have my assortment. It's already been decided. I don't want to touch it. Then we have some ideas for you. Okay? If your assortment is large relative to your competition, play it up. And how do you play it up? Then encourage affect reliance. Okay? Make consumers feeling focus more on how fun your assortment is. That's exactly what Bath & Body Works does. They have, in this category, about 120 body washes, and then they say, we make fragrance fun. That's exactly the right message if you have a large assortment. If you're in the same category, though, and you have a small assortment, then you should not try to emphasize so much the feelings and emotions associated with the product offering that you have, but then focus more on the functionality of that. So if you L'Occitane, you might talk about the quality ingredients, naturalness of the sources, some of the functional benefits, and so on and so forth. The last one that I have for you is if you are in those categories that are inherently aversive, okay, and then you can sort of imagine some of these, like life insurance, medical procedure, etc., then having a large assortment doesn't necessarily make sense. And so let me try to see if I can click on this one here. I hope the browser is open here. Okay, it is open. This is a website I just found this morning. All right. So this is caskets again. So I didn't make this up. So okay. So how many caskets would you like to see? I have 1 minute. Well, let's see. I can keep going, and I think about 1 minute is not going to be enough. But you can sort of see. I mean, this is the kind of. I mean, it doesn't make any sense to be offering 10,000 caskets, right? When you're in these kind of categories, right? So, so let me see. Now I have to somehow go back. How do I go back to my slideshow? Say that again. That's why you need to test your presentation. Okay, thank you. So clearly for those categories, I mean, you should not encourage, not have a big assortment or try to play down the affect elements, okay? So do not call your caskets, I don't know, gloom or something like this, right? So, anyways, that's all I had to share with you, so thank you very much. Questions? Yes, sir.
Any of these conditions, did you actually ask respondents to make a decision, and did you ask them how good they felt about it afterward?
A decision from within the assortment. The answer is no. The answer is no. It's not. We really, as I said, we focus on the initial appeal of the assortment rather than how satisfied they are from making an actual choice. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Kind of thinking about like your presentation on the earlier one about retailers. Sorry, I'm also sick. So thinking about the earlier presentation in which we talked about sort of the retailer tendency to sort of limit assortment to lower income households and lower income areas, and looking at yours in which lower income I would say segments are typically more adept to shopping and wanting more of that larger assortment. Is it almost thinking that retailers are going contrary against sort of the consumer needs, consumer wants when we look at that? Again, the lower income people desire and want more assortment, but then at the same time they're being limited by their retailers.
It's a very good question. I don't know for sure, but I can make one argument that a hypothesis that needs to be tested, that if you are a struggling consumer, the mindset that you bring to the class is to the decision is going to be a very, very functional mindset. It's going to be, you know what, I need to put food on the table. I need to get some bread. And you might not be the kind of consumers that is this high affective engagement kind of consumer. So I would say that from that perspective, it would be aligned with the pattern that Randy was describing earlier. One more question. Okay. Yes, sir.
Curious about not only assortment, but have you studied kind of the engagement process? And I'm thinking about renting a car or buying a funeral, and whether a more kind of involved, and I was thinking about the MetLife presentation yesterday about how can you kind of walk through the customer experience and how that would kind of line up in your research.
So restate it again, because I'm not sure.
I was almost thinking of it rather than assortment in terms of consumer level engagement. If I'm a business traveler wanting to rent a car, I'm just going to want to get my car fast. But if I am there on vacation, I may want somebody to help me find like a car that might be fun, like a convertible or something like that. And I might need more time from the business, from like a car rental company, to help me with that purchase process, and how that might make it more fun and engaging to purchase.
So that clearly would align with our pattern, that for someone who is more leisurely and think more about how do they feel about things, it's okay to provide a larger assortment. It may be even fun to do that. Whether that makes sense from a business standpoint in terms of cost of servicing the customer, that's something that we have not looked at. But I've done other research that shows that very simple things can really change how much people engage, And so last year I was here presenting another project where even asking people, do you like this? You don't like this? That is also creating engagement. And for the same reason that people just like to tell you whether they like things or not, okay? And that's creating those subtle feelings and emotions. And so in a nutshell, here's my conclusion, that there's a lot more feelings and emotions that are happening in the marketplace than we somehow teach in business schools, and that do have a lot of implications in the way we should be engaging with our customers. Thank you.